We're talking Giants and we're talking Senior Bowl with Brandon Olsen of LockedOn Gators, also of Giants Country, who is on the ground in Mobile, Alabama. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times the amount of your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I am Patricia Traynor, your host, and I am joined today by Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators, also a writer in Giants Country. He is down at the Senior Bowl, so he's got boots on the ground, and he's going to share with us some observations, takeaways from the workouts, any observations, especially when it comes to the Giants, who they might be looking at and whatnot. Brandon, thanks so much for taking time out. I know Mobile is a hot spot. You got things to do, dinners and stuff to go to, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on with me.
Of course, anytime.
All right. Brandon, let's kick it off by getting your thoughts about what you have seen so far. I think it's been a couple of days now of practice. What position groups, what players have stood out to you the most that maybe might fit what the Giants need?
Yeah, one player that I've been loving what I've seen from him so far is Georgia running back Kenny McIntosh. He's been just so explosive. So watching him play has been great. And he's someone that I just like because he's genuinely a dual threat running back where towards the end of the season, he was actually lighting it up. And then today he had a few big runs. He made plays in the passing game. Him and Tajay Spears out of Tulane have both been big time playmakers in both the passing game and the running game. And I've seen enough defenders do push-ups after allowing touchdowns now where they're making some waves.
That's interesting because the Giants, of course, need some defenders. Have anybody kind of really stood out? I mean, Wink Martindale, I know, was down there watching things. Has he paid any attention to a specific group or a specific player?
Today, when I saw him, it seemed like he was right near the offensive line versus defensive line drills. So I'm assuming he was looking more at defensive line and edge rusher there. And Carl Brooks out of Bowling Green just had one heck of a day today. He was creating consistent pressure every time I looked at him, and he did it in college too. He was a pressure cooker, but his biggest thing was, congratulations, you're creating that pressure in the MAC. Can you do it on the biggest stage? And this is the biggest stage for him. He gets to go against other Power 5 players. There's Georgia offensive linemen here. There's Florida offensive linemen here. There's offensive linemen from far and wide. So to be able to consistently wreak havoc here is important. And look, drills, it's hard to raise your stock a ton at the Senior Bowl because so much of it is just one-on-ones, and you very rarely get a one-on-one in the NFL. But if there's any defensive lineman, edge rusher that's been doing it for me, it's Carl Brooks. He's just so explosive in every step of the way. And again, I've seen him do it for years now at the college level, and to watch him take the step up, he's one of those players where you're going to see him go against Power 5 players and he's going to find success. And that's exactly what he's been doing in these 2 days.
You know, taking a step back, Brandon, I often say that the Giants don't see their needs the way we do. And just in going through the roster and doing evaluations and grades, of which I did offensive grades yesterday, going to do defensive grades later in the week. One of the positions that I wonder if the Giants are actually 2 positions. We know they need linebacker help, inside linebacker help, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I also think they could probably benefit by adding another defensive interior guy to maybe spell Dexter and Leonard Williams, as well as maybe another edge rusher. Do you agree with that? And if so, who are some of the names that maybe are emerging as potential guys to watch in those areas?
Yeah, Derek Hall from Auburn had, I think, some moments, we'll say, today where David Harrison with Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bucks pointed out that at practice he kind of set up an inside move and looked good, and then he just didn't do it. Like then he was just like, I guess what, I'm going to run back at you. But that's like one of those things where if you can refine that, and you can, kind of put into your head, hey, you're setting him up there, go inside and chase and kill, then you can find some success doing that. I will say this week or today especially just seemed like defensive linemen. I don't know if it was that they were on edge or what, but there were quite a few offsides here during these drills where there's really not a ton of reason to do that. But yeah, there were quite a few offsides there where you would like to see them improve, but both the Bama guys, DJ Dale and Byron Young, Bama is going to find success here. That's what they do. That's their bread and butter with Alabama. So they're just two more names that have kind of popped out a little bit, I'll say, for me.
Staying with the defensive side of the ball, we know the Giants need an inside linebacker. Is there anybody who's kind of jumped out at you at that spot?
Inside linebacker is one where there hasn't been anybody that's been, I'll say, overwhelmingly successful, but there are some players who have shown flashes and you think, okay, if we can put that together, then you can really do it. And someone like out of Washington State, Diane Henley, who he played receiver at Nevada before flipping to linebacker. And they have a giant board at the stadium while we're at practices. And it's like, oh, fastest player, fastest ball, longest hang time on a kick or a punt. And every time that they go linebacker, top speed, Diane Henley is right up there because he's just so fast and so quick. And the way that I think about it is with how often the Giants blitz their inside linebackers, having that speed and that quick first step to actually just blow by defenders, and especially if you want to, delay it a little bit because we know we could still hit home. Someone like Diane Henley, who just plays with no fear in his heart, is a guy that I'm looking at as he's quick, he's fast, he's got tenacious is what I'll say. He is a tenacious linebacker and he wants to inflict some pain. And so he's a name that is going to consistently pop up and impress.
What about a cornerback? I think that's a position they also probably want to address. Aaron Robinson should be back next year, but I think he's going to be more of a big corner, a big slot corner. Probably need somebody opposite of Adoree Jackson. Who stood out in that group?
Julius Brents has been impressive for me, and that's something that's important because when he was at Kansas State, they played so much zone coverage, where here, as a DB, you're thrown into these one-on-ones. The one-on-ones are a huge part of the Senior Bowl, which is great if you're looking for man corners, and Julius Brents is someone who was never really asked to do that, and it was kind of, was he not asked to do it because he can't do it, or was he not asked to do it because that's just not what they wanted to do? But he's showed up here and he's played well every step of the way. So Julius Brents has been making a name for himself a bit. Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami is someone that I liked to begin with because he's I'll say bigger corner. He's a shade under 6'1". He's got these long arms. He's physical at the line of scrimmage. And he's another one who today was making plays. He can get hands in there because he's got those long arms where he can make a play because of that. And so Tyreek Stevenson is someone who he just popped, and Julius Brents is someone who, again, I didn't anticipate looking at and going, oh, the Giants could add him because we've seen him play so much zone and so little man. But in the one-on-ones, if you succeed in man, then you succeed in man, and you're someone that I instantly want to look at.
Now, this is kind of interesting for the Giants because Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, is a finalist from what according to reports, for the Colts head job. And I know this is speculation on your part, on my part, but how much, if Wink were to leave, typically how much would you say the defense changes, depending on, I guess if they promoted from within, you're not talking a huge change, but if they brought somebody in from the outside, does that Do you think that changes what the Giants look for, or do they just look for guys that are versatile enough to plug into any situation?
I think that you look for versatility here, mainly because Wink Martindale he's been here for a year and he's getting these head coach interviews. So you think it's only a matter of time before he's gone. And you might not think that you have your next defensive coordinator internally available. So you might have to look outside. And Wink Martindale, as fun as this defense is, it's relatively unique. A lot of teams blitz, but not a lot of teams blitz and play cover zero on the back end and they just go, hey man, you're on an island. Good luck to you. So that's something where I think you look for someone who can be versatile. And even if you keep Wink or not, it's great to have someone who can do everything, because there's certain matchups where it's like, okay, hey, like cover 3 is the move against this team very frequently. And that's something that you're going to do. And Wink has shown, like, I'm willing to adjust and do things slightly differently at times. And so I think adding that versatility, especially in your secondary, cannot be overstated and can't be overlooked.
Where do you see as the strength of the defensive side of the ball so far?
At the Senior Bowl?
Yeah.
I think DB. I think defensive back just in general, because there's corners and safeties, but they all get run all over the place, and it's all these one-on-ones again. Whether you're a safety or a cornerback, you are going into these one-on-ones against wide receivers and against running backs that they want to split out wide. And so I think defensive backs have kind of popped a little bit, and it could be that the quarterback play here isn't the most impressive we've ever seen. And so these defensive backs can make more plays on the ball because of that. But there have been complete plays where we saw it even earlier today. There was a play where I believe it was Tyler Badgett out of Shepherd, who was playing QB. He went through all of his progressions, and I guess it was kind of like, hey, you have to throw the ball at the end of this play. And he threw it to someone who was just completely blanketed, because every time he went through a progression, there were DBs in the receivers' pockets at that point. So I think defensive backs have really popped in a time where this isn't a DB friendly place. You show up and you're putting these one-on-ones and you're asked to just play straight man coverage where you don't do that frequently. And they've stepped up every step of the way.
Music to the Giants' ears, because like I said, they could probably use some help at DB, specifically at cornerback, and maybe even another safety, depending on what happens with Julian Love, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent. All right, coming up next here on the Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to talk about the offensive side of the ball with Brandon Olsen of LockedOn Gators, who is on the ground at the Senior Bowl. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, this year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner. And FanDuel has so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So go ahead and download FanDuel right now so that you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey, Giant fans, you probably already know this, but if you don't, I'm on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Patricia_Traina, Traina. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA. And the Locked On Giants podcast has its own Instagram account now at Locked On Giants. Check them out. We have video clips, audio clips, pictures, all kinds of cool stuff. You will not want to miss it all off season long, into the spring and into the summer and the regular season. So come by, check us out, like and follow, and we will see you on Instagram. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Trainer, your host, and I'm joined by Brandon Olsen, who is the host of Locked On Gators. He's also a writer for me over at Giants Country. Does a really good job with the X's and O's, so make sure you check out his work. And he is on the ground right now at the Senior Bowl. So he has been at the practices, has a bunch of notes, observations, and just, taking it all in. Exciting times down at Mobile. Brandon, let's talk about the offensive side of the ball, because that's an area the Giants desperately need to upgrade. And we've got to start with receivers. What have you seen from the receivers? Who's standing out and who's kind of surprised you?
I think at receiver, probably one of the guys that I've been liking the most here is Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State, who I liked beforehand, but seeing him in these one-on-ones and seeing him with, we'll say, better quarterback play than he had at Iowa State. It's still not great, but better. He's been a guy that's been standing out. Puka Nacua on day one stood out a bit out of BYU. He's another guy who I think you can line up pretty much anywhere and just go, hey, like we need you to do this, and you're going to do it, and you're going to do it well, and you can do it reliably. And he's an explosive playmaker. He was in college. He is here. That's what he does. Like he just makes plays. And Jaden Reed out of Michigan State, not the best passing attack we've ever seen, but he is very fast. I think today he topped 20 miles per hour according to Zebra Technologies and their big board. And the second fastest receiver, I want to say, was at 18.87 miles per hour. So he was a full mile per hour faster than any other receiver. He's making plays as an actual pass catcher, not just I'm fast and that's all I'm good for. So he was actually making plays here. And so Jaden Reed is someone that I wasn't high on, but with his speed and with his actual playmaking ability here has been impressive.
And just sticking with receivers for a moment, obviously there are different types, different sizes, shapes. You've got slot guys, you've got outside guys. Where is this class so far most abundant?
I feel like a lot of the receivers here have been, I'll say there's a good variation between shifty receivers that you look at and you go, okay, you're probably going to play in the slot more likely than not. And just these contested catch guys, which I hate calling them that, because I feel like then you're like, oh, so you can't create separation. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do as a receiver. But I feel like contested catch guys and just these shiftier receivers, whether they're smaller or not, doesn't necessarily, like, not everybody's Wan'Dale Robinson over here with height wise and just physical stature wise. But shifty, solid route runners is something that we've been looking for. And that's one of the things where DBs have been looking very good against shifty route runners. And that's one of the things that's been so impressive about them. But I would say those two archetypes, we'll say.
Joe Shane, in his year-end presser, made a comment. He said, you're not necessarily one player away. And the thinking is that the Giants, if they get a number one receiver, that's going to change the whole complexion of, the offense. That said, the free agency class, I think we can all both agree, is not great looking right now. If we look at the draft class, is there a guy that maybe can be had who can become a legitimate number one receiver, that tall X receiver that, I think they would like for Daniel Jones to have?
In the draft class in general?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, receivers is a spot where every year there's great receivers, and every year you go, oh, next year's receivers class is going to be awesome. But Quentin Johnson out of TCU is probably the number one guy for me as far as being able to line up on the outside every snap and go up with whoever it might be. And we saw his speed, his size. We've seen everything from him now. And there's another one in Jalen Hyatt's not the tallest. He's 6'1", 6'2"-ish, but just lightning fast. And that's something where you can't replace, like you can't just find that everywhere. A.T. Perry, who is at the Shrine Bowl, not the Senior Bowl, has been doing fantastic in these one-on-ones. He's struggled with drops here and there, specifically at Shrine Bowl practices, but he's been getting open consistently. And for someone that's 6'5", if you can create separation and get open, yeah, I love you, and I want you on my football team immediately.
Yeah, I think the Giants would happily take that if they could find somebody like that, but those guys are very hard to come by for sure. What about, maybe some guys that are flying under the radar at receiver that, maybe would be a good fit for the type of offense that the Giants run?
Yeah, I think you look at someone like I'm not going to. I'm going to try to pronounce his last name, but Andre Yosivas out of Princeton, who's been here, and he's one of those guys where he's going to benefit from being able to go. I don't play against the top competition in college, so I need to prove myself here at the Senior Bowl, and he's had I'll say solid showing so far. Ronnie Bell has had a relatively up and down college career. He lit it up. He got injured. He came back and played solidly in an offense that wanted to run the ball a ton. So it's going back and forth here between guys. There's Jake Bobo out of UCLA, who for a while was a touchdown machine. He was just like, hey, guess what? You give me the ball and I'm getting into the end zone. And Chip Kelly did a fantastic job of getting him open and creating opportunities for him. Xavier Hutchinson is another name that I mentioned earlier from Iowa State, who consistently, like, there's not people that are 6'3" and move the way that Xavier Hutchinson moves. So he's someone that honestly, I could see him climbing up quite a bit, especially after the combine, if he does perform well.
If the Giants don't come away with a legitimate X receiver, a legitimate number one receiver, can this offense still take the improvement, that step forward in year two?
I think you could, just by adding, even if you don't add a number one, adding a legitimate number two and number three options, because this was a team that even like when they were healthy, okay at receiver, and then they weren't healthy for the huge majority of the season. And so just adding further depth that is NFL talent and can step in and contribute right away is obviously something that's very important. You could add someone like Marvin Mims, who I don't think Marvin Mims is at any All-Star game right now, but he's still only 20 years old, even though he's got years of tape now at Oklahoma. And he worked in an offense that was like, hey, we're gonna pace and space here, and we're going to go no huddle, and we're going to get you shifty and moving underneath and try to create some plays for you. So Marvin Mims is someone that if you can grab him in the third or fourth round, I don't need you to be my number one. You can be a number two for now or number three for now, and then we will eventually find that guy that we need.
Let's talk now about offensive line, because that's another area that they have to beef up a little bit, especially in the interior, preferably at center, getting a center who has actually played center as opposed to a guard convert. What have you seen from the interior offensive lineman? Anybody jumping out at you that you say, this guy's got Giant written all over him?
It's John Michael Schmitz. Like, and I know that I wrote about him the other day, and I don't want to seem redundant, but I wrote about him for a reason. He's a very experienced center. There's few centers in this draft class, I think, that have better hand placement, if there's any. And then just watching him in one-on-ones today, like he was putting dudes in the dirt. he was putting them on the ground with malicious intent there. And so I think John Michael Schmitz is, if you're looking for a center, he is the number one guy that you go for. And I cannot express enough how impressive he's been, not just through Senior Bowl practices, but just this season. He's also been great for a guy that hasn't been given the love that he probably deserves.
So kind of flying under the radar, it sounds like.
A little bit.
And maybe that stock rises as he continues, because I'm sure he's going to go to the combine next month, or later this month, I should say. So, but definitely, the Giants, like you said, get a center for the long term. Maybe they bring back one of Feliciano or Gates, let him be the stopgap, and then groom a rookie to take over at some point. That's how I would approach it at any rate, if it makes any sense. Who else in the interior has stood out to you, maybe at guard? Because that left guard situation is still kind of unsettled, I think.
Yeah, I think at guard, and this is going to seem a little Gators biased, but Osiris Torrance is him at guard. He was the best guard in the country this season. He's been the best guard in the country for a few years, but He was at Louisiana before that, and then he came to Florida. And the biggest thing was, but can you do it against the SEC? And he came out and he did it against the SEC, and he's done it every step of the way. He's the best guard in the country. It's not close. I'm not going to pretend that it's even close, but throughout his career, he's had, I think it's almost 2,000 snaps now, and he never allowed a sack. Not a single sack in his career. He's a fantastic interior offensive lineman. There's been clips going around on Twitter of him today throwing defensive linemen to the ground. So O'Cyrus Torrence, we'll see if he's in range for the Giants, because if I'm an NFL team, he's not making it out of the first round.
Wow. That says a lot too, because usually you don't go with guards, too high in the draft. Maybe towards the bottom you would go for them, but that sounds really impressive. All right, folks, you're listening to Locked On Giants. We are talking Senior Bowl with Brandon Olsen of LockedOn Gators, who's also a Giants country writer, so he knows a little bit about the Giants' needs and whatnot. Coming up, we're going to talk about sleepers and prospects, so stick with us. Hey, Giant fans, playing daily fantasy based on player projections has never been easier when you visit prizepicks.com. Pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go on to score more or less than their prize picks projection, you win up to 25 times the amount of your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada, and they offer projections on every sport. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and Prize Picks offers safe and fast withdrawals. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up at prizepicks.com. Hey, Giant fans, Locked On is at the Senior Bowl this week. Get inside analysis from the hosts that covered the NFL's next generation in college, and find out which NFL draft boards these players will be climbing, all in one location. Subscribe to Locked On NFL Draft for nightly live shows from the Senior Bowl, airing on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen every day. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Plus, get in-depth analysis on the biggest games with the NFL key predictions every Friday. And Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. Patricia Traina here with you. Brandon Olsen of LockedOn Gators is my guest. He's a writer over at Giants Country. We're talking Senior Bowl observations. Brandon is down in Mobile, Alabama, having watched it. He's hanging out with all the cool people while I'm sitting here at home freezing. So, lucky him. So I appreciate you taking on the time, Brandon. Brandon, let's talk about some prospects, because, one position that doesn't, that could get a mention or a look from the Giants, believe it or not, is quarterback. Now, the Giants have every intention of bringing Daniel Jones back. He should be back. But I personally think they're going to look to draft a developmental prospect. Is there anybody that's kind of stood out in the quarterback group that maybe would make for a good developmental prospect?
It hasn't been a great 2 days for them, but also I think it's important to say that while I go, oh yeah, like quarterbacks have struggled, it's probably the hardest position on offense to play at the Senior Bowl, because you're showing up with guys that you have no rapport with, no chemistry with, and you have to try to go and figure it out. And you don't have to worry about chemistry when you're playing DB in these one-on-ones, but as a quarterback and receiver, you have to worry about how fast is this guy? How quick can he start? Is he good at contested catches? What can he do? So quarterback is probably the hardest position on offense to play at the Senior Bowl. But I will say there were quite a few throws that I saw today from Max Duggan that I didn't see him making in college at TCU. And Max Duggan is someone who at TCU as a freshman was horrible. And then he consistently improved year after year. And then this past season exploded with TCU when they went, oh, we should try throwing the ball downfield at some point. And he got significantly better. The mobility is there. He's got arm talent. It's just a matter of, can he operate your offense consistently? Because there have been periods, even this past season, when he had a great year and he was a Heisman finalist, where there were times where he just went ghost as a passer and couldn't complete much, but could make the plays with his legs still. So if you're looking for someone that you can take a swing on, Max Duggan might be that guy. Hendon Hooker's here out of Tennessee, but he's not playing. He's still recovering from a torn ACL, but walking around, he looked fine. I saw him yesterday, and he was walking perfectly normal, not even a limp. And he's someone where offense was a little unorthodox at Tennessee. It was really cool to see, but it was unorthodox, but he did a fantastic job as a passer at Tennessee. So I think those would probably be the two biggest guys, as much as, Tyson Bagent being from Shepherd and being here is cool, and Clayton Tune is cool. But I think if you're looking for a quarterback where you go, okay, we're going to sit you for a bit and try to develop you and take you from the Senior Bowl specifically, you're looking at Max Duggan, and you're looking at, you can even add probably Malik Cunningham to that, but it's mostly Max Duggan and Hendon Hooker, who Hendon Hooker is going to need time anyway, since he does have that torn ACL that he got late in the 2022 season.
What about the running back position? Obviously the Giants would like Saquon back, unless, of course, Saquon prices himself out of the Giants' range, which, according to reports, is the case right now. The two sides still remain hopeful of getting a deal done, but are there running backs maybe that can be had in day 2, day 3 of the draft that can step in and give them the, decent production, maybe not Saquon-like production, but to get the job done, to move the chains?
Yeah, I think the number one guy that, as you just described that, the number one guy that popped in my head was Roschon Johnson out of Texas. Quarterback, converted to running back as a true freshman. The plan was to move back to quarterback, and he just had such a good freshman year that they were like, hey, no, you're staying at running back. And now he's at the Senior Bowl, and he's tall, he's powerful, he can perform as a pass catcher. I don't know what it is about him, considering he's a former quarterback, but he loves the contact and he loves pass protection, which is something that Giants fans have not seen a ton of in the backfield out of running backs. But Roschon Johnson is probably that guy for me. This is a strong running back room or strong running back group in general at the Senior Bowl. Any player in this backfield, I could see the Giants taking, and I'd be like, okay, I'm cool with it. Like Evan Hull was probably out of Northwestern. He was probably the guy that I was least excited for. Not that I was not looking forward to, but I was least excited for. And he ripped off multiple runs today of 20, 25, 30 yards. And they were runs that were supposed to be to the interior, and he bounced them out and created these big plays. So Evan Hull is someone who climbed up a bit today. There's only so much you can climb up at these, but climbed up a bit for me today just because I wasn't expecting to see that from him. Multiple running backs here, I would have been like, okay, yeah, I expect that. But Evan Hull wasn't one, and he did it multiple times.
What about a tight end? They could probably use another tight end, I would think, to complement Bellinger and one of whoever they keep, whether it be Vanette or Cager. Anybody at the tight end group really standing out to you?
Will Mallory impressed me today. Will Mallory out of Miami was someone that, just watching him, I've liked at Miami, but then expectations were set so high because he had a good freshman year, and he kind of just never really took massive strides. He's an okay pass catcher. He reminds me kind of Daniel Bellinger, where when he was coming out of San Diego State, it's like, okay, you're a solid pass catcher, you're a solid blocker, you're good at everything, but you're not great at anything necessarily. So Will Mallory was that guy that stuck out for me today at tight end. Josh Wiley from Cincinnati is a better pass catching type that I think, where he worked in an offense that gave you plenty of freedom as a receiver. And that was something where blocking can kind of improve a little bit, but as a pass catcher, he's someone that you look at and you go, okay, we don't have to play you at wide receiver, at a glorified wide receiver spot. We could just play you at tight end, and you can still create and shake linebackers and still be too big for safeties to really stick with you. So Josh Wiley and Will Mallory are probably the two biggest tight ends that, just watching at Senior Bowl practice, were impressive.
Were there any other prospects that kind of jumped off the field at you and made you say, I'm going to keep an eye on these guys moving forward?
Yeah, there were a couple of players who both of the Iowa DBs were making plays today. Riley Morris, Kayvon Merriweather. They actually had one play where one deflected it and the other almost intercepted it, and it was just a cool little thing to see two Iowa players do that at the same time. So they were up there for sure. Isaiah Foskey is just an impressive. He's an edge rusher type that has a high ceiling, but I feel like for years now, just waiting for Notre Dame, we've been like, okay, Isaiah Foskey's the guy, and he's never really taken those strides. Andre Carter II had a solid performance today out of Army. There's a lot of guys that maybe aren't working themselves into first round consideration, but you see them make a play at the Senior Bowl and you go, okay, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look there. And I think that's the main benefit of the Senior Bowl, where it's impossible to watch all of these players, but when you're at the Senior Bowl and you have a coaching staff, like the Giants had, I want to say, at least 7 people I've seen over the past 2 days here, and they step in and you make a play and you go, okay, now you're really impressive, and I am going to take a better look at you and a longer look at you. So I think that's one of the things that you really get from the Senior Bowl, and there's been a lot of guys who have made. Jalen Duncan from Maryland was another one, by the way, who today made a couple plays, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to give you a further look.
Well, General Manager Joe Shane likes his Senior Bowl players because I think all of the draft picks he had last year, or most of them, I should say, did play in that Senior Bowl. So certainly that's why we're paying close attention. Brandon, really good stuff. I appreciate you coming on to talk Giants and potential draft prospects and Senior Bowl stuff. And hope you are having a fantastic time down there with Ross Jackson, David Harrison, Gene. Louis down there too, right? Louis DiBiase.
Louis DiBiase's down here. Lauren
taking
Cox
time away
is
of
here.
Locked On Eagles, before the Eagles go on to the Super Bowl. So a whole little group down there, huh?
Yeah. I think we've got 9 Locked On members here
between college and NFL, right?
Yeah, there's 3 college and then the rest are NFL.
Next year I'm going to have to try and get down there. I wanted to go this year, but with the season running as late as it did, just the timing didn't work out. But anyway, do appreciate you coming on and giving us the insight. Great stuff. We're going to have more of you, obviously, on Giants Country. And of course, folks, make sure you check them out on Locked On Gators. For Brandon Olsen, I'm Patricia Traina. Don't forget, folks, tonight, Locked On Giants Live, my special guest is going to be Sam Prince. And then we're going to have another show tomorrow. I got to do the defensive grades and the special teams grades. So plenty more coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We will see you later tonight or tomorrow. Take care, everybody.